Now, we've always done that on the way in, and this will mean we do it on the way out as well. This will give us more time, more information to make better decisions in the way we protect both on the way in and on the way out.
Last night on the program, the ASIO Director General David Irvin said that the terrorist threat had been building in Australia over the past year or so. You're on the National Security Committee of Cabinet, you hear the briefings. What exactly has been building?
Well, without going into specifics, I mean, what David Irvine said last night was no surprise. I mean, what we have seen is more and more people being drawn to a honeypot for terrorists over there in Iraq and Syria.
So
and what
specifically,
we're seeing,
so what's building then? Is it the radicalisation of people? Is it the threats or intelligence pointing to possible terror attacks in Australia? What is it specifically that's building?
What we're seeing is more and more people go, and more people being energised to go, and the contacts between those overseas and those back here in Australia. Now, the risk here is, because we saw this after other previous conflicts, when people had gone overseas and been radicalised and came back, two-thirds of them got up to things when they came back. Now, that's why this whole issue is not imagined. It is very, very real, and I think David made that point very, very well last night. And he is the one who sets the threat level.
But so is what, just to be as clear as possible, is what's building then a process of radicalisation, not an actual increase in intelligence pointing to planning for terrorist attacks in Australia or references to Australia that are being made by Islamic State overseas?
Well, you wouldn't expect me to comment on that level of specifics, Lee, I don't think, because of the nature and sensitivity of these things. But what is happening is both those who are expressing an interest in these very, very dangerous ideas, a willingness to get involved, many of them there, receiving training, expertise, networks, links, and all of the rest of that, and that comes back to Australia as well. It is putting the ingredients together for something, and that is what we need to be very mindful of. And the history tells us that when people get involved in these conflicts, then it reaches back to Australia. And what David Irvine is, let's remember this, he is in charge of domestic national security, not what's happening in the Middle East, and he knows that this links back to what is happening right here.
But what we know about Islamic State is that their goal is to establish a caliphate in the Middle East. Why would they be using their limited resources to target Australia when that is their very clear regional goal?
I don't think we could limit their expectations or their ambitions to just that, Lee, but also we're not just talking about ISIL, we're talking about other terrorist organisations, and there are the arrest today and possible others that related to one of the other terrorist groups. So we're talking about a broad sweep across the Middle East, which, as I said, is drawing foreign fighters from all around the world, and that presents a threat, whether it's in Australia, in the United Kingdom or many other places. And our region, we have to be mindful of that as well. There are people coming out of Indonesia and fighting there, and other countries within our region. So we need to work closely with our neighbours to protect the region and Australia from the threat.
Are there specific threats against Australia, or are you talking about a general threat against Western ideology and Western interests?
Well, the threat level, as you know, goes from to likely and then imminent, and what the Inspector General, the Director General, I should say, is looking at is whether we're going to that likely phase, and that is a judgment for him to make.
That doesn't quite answer the question about whether the threats specifically target and name Australia, or whether IS and associated terror groups simply have an anti-Western agenda.
No, well, I think these things do get specific to Australia, and I'm not at liberty to go beyond a statement such as that. The fact that there are Australians involved and links to people in Australia, and there is ambitions that go well beyond just the establishment of the state. And as I said, there are many other terrorist organisations that fit under this umbrella of what is occurring in the Middle East. ISIL may be the one that is receiving much of the attention presently, but there is a web of these terrorist organisations operating there in very loose alliances, and many of them have any number of objectives. And the fact that they can establish networks and people and other things back in Australia is something that obviously has us concerned. Now, I think it's important to be just aware at the present. The government is responding appropriately, $630 million in the package to counter what we believe the threat is. And there's a legislative package that will follow, which enhances these operational measures we've put in place.
Today we've had you announcing the new counter-terrorism measures. Is the timing of all of that a coincidence, or is it part of a campaign, for lack of a better word, to prepare Australians for the terror alert level being raised?
I think it's simply the transition of events, and as I said, David Irvine, as the Director General, makes these assessments independently. These aren't decisions made by politicians. He is there to set those threat levels, and that's what he has been commenting on. Now, the government has been receiving advice from our agencies about the emerging threat, and we've been responding to that. And we've been, I think, very upfront with the Australian people about that.
Briefly before you go, there are rumours of a potential reshuffle in the Abbott front bench. Are you ready to move on from immigration?
I'm totally committed to the job that I have in front of me. We have not yet fully stopped the boats, but the boats are stopping, and there are the many threats across the border that I've referred to today in my speech. These matters are always for the Prime Minister to determine, but he has a very strong team and we've had a very strong year.
Do you consider that you deserve a reward for the progress you've made in stopping the boats?
To be able to do what we said we'd do, get the results that we said we would get, that is the satisfaction I take from the job.